My name is Ursula Hayes. I am 69 years old, a widow, and I live alone in New York. I thought the hardest chapter of my life ended when I buried my husband, Harold. But I was wrong. The real storm began only days after my son's wedding. I still remember the sound of the doorbell that morning. Sharp, uninvited. When I opened the door, my new daughter-in-law, Miranda, was standing on my porch. She wore a cream coat and a smile that never reached her eyes. Beside her was a tall man in a gray suit. He introduced himself as Oliver Pike, an attorney. He carried a leather briefcase polished to a shine, the kind of shine that usually means bad news for someone. Before I could even invite them in, Oliver stepped forward and set a thick folder on my kitchen table. Across the top page, in bold black letters, I saw the words, Power of Attorney. Miranda's voice was sweet, rehearsed, almost gentle. Mother Hayes, we just want you to feel safe. We want to help you manage things. Her hand tapped the folder as though it were a gift, not a trap. I sat down slowly. I didn't touch the papers. Instead, I wrapped my hands around my teacup, letting the steam curl upward. My silence filled the room, but inside my chest, one truth thundered: $60 million. That was the value of the penthouse Harold left me when he died. A fortress of glass and sky above Manhattan, protected by a trust he had built with meticulous care. Before his last breath, Harold had pressed my hand and whispered, "Do not tell them." Not yet. One day you'll understand why. And so, at my son Ethan's wedding, I had smiled politely, seated at table 12 behind a wall of flowers, and stayed silent about the inheritance. I said nothing about the penthouse, nothing about the $60 million. Thank goodness I did, because if I had revealed it that night, by the time I opened this door, I might already have lost everything. Now here was Miranda, my son's wife, standing in my kitchen with a lawyer at her side, demanding signatures and, soon enough, the keys. Oliver adjusted his tie and leaned closer. Ethan has already agreed this is the best course, Mrs. Hayes. All we need is your signature. Those words cut sharper than the paper in front of me. Ethan has already agreed. My only child. The boy I once held through nights of fever. The man who had just pledged his life to Miranda. He had agreed to this? To handing over the very home his father had guarded with his last breath? I wanted to shout. I wanted to demand answers. But I remembered Harold's voice, patient and steady. Silence is sometimes stronger than words. So I let the quiet stretch, heavier than iron. Miranda shifted in her chair. Oliver cleared his throat. They thought I was fragile, an old woman cornered by legal language. They had no idea that silence was my armor, and that the penthouse was shielded by more than walls of glass. It was bound by a trust as unbreakable as Harold's faith in me. This, right here, was the moment my story began, the moment silence saved me. If you want to know how it unfolded, how I faced my son's betrayal, how I guarded the penthouse worth $60 million, and how quiet strength turned into the only weapon I had, stay with me. Take a second to like this story, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss what comes next. I promise, it only grows more powerful from here. The church smelled of lilies and floor polish, the kind of scent that makes every footstep feel like an intrusion. I arrived early, my navy dress carefully pressed, my hair pinned just so. I told myself this was my son's day, my Ethan, my only child. No matter how small my place might be, I would honor him by being there. A young usher in a black suit checked his clipboard. scanned my name, and guided me to a round table. "Table 12, he said, as if reciting a line from a script. He pulled out a chair for me, tucked behind a marble column and a towering vase of roses and glass. From where I sat, the entire dance floor disappeared. All I could see was the thick arrangement of white petals and glinting crystal. If I leaned to the left, I caught only a narrow slice of the aisle. If I leaned right, I saw the edge of the head table, just enough to watch the groomsmen lift their champagne glasses, never enough to see Ethan's face. I straightened my silverware, adjusted my napkin, and pretended this was a seat of my choosing. But I knew what it was, a polite exile. Across the room, I watched Miranda's mother, Sylvia Langford, glide to her seat near the front. She wore a gown stitched with pale sequins, her hair styled into a crown that glittered under the chandeliers. Every camera turned toward her. Every guest offered praise for the flowers, the menu, the orchestra. Sylvia accepted each compliment with the tilt of a queen. Meanwhile, I sat behind roses that blocked me like a wall. My place card carried my name in tiny script, nothing more. No introduction from the planner, no acknowledgement from the photographer. A mother, yes, but hidden in plain sight. The music shifted. Guests rose as Miranda appeared at the far doors, her veil trailing like a stream of light. Applause and gasps rippled through the hall. I leaned, straining to catch a glimpse, but the columns sliced her from view. I heard the vows, muffled by the flowers. I caught fragments of words, for better, for worse, in sickness, in health. My lips moved silently with them, because I had once spoken those same promises to Harold. We had carried them for decades, through every tight year and long night. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the room roared with cheers. I clapped softly into the curtain of petals. My hands trembled against the tablecloth. No one saw. No one needed to. At dinner, I waited for Ethan to stop by. He was radiant in his suit, his face lit with pride and nerves. He kissed my cheek quickly, whispered, "Thank you for coming," then was pulled away by Sylvia's guiding hand. She steered him toward business associates, friends of influence, people whose names carried weight. I was left with appetizers arranged like jewelry and the muffled laughter of strangers. During toasts, Sylvia spoke at length. She told the story of Miranda rescuing a stray dog in college, her voice bright with drama. The crowd laughed, dabbed their eyes, and clinked glasses. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, knees unsteady, but voice steady enough. I spoke of Ethan's first toolbox, the day Harold taught him to hold the level steady until the bubble floated between the lines. My toast was short. I lifted my glass, smiled, and sat down before anyone had to decide what they thought of me. When the dancing began, the couple twirled in circles of applause. I caught glimpses between shoulders, lace, and crystal. Ethan's smile flickered in fragments, never whole, never mine. I stayed seated, counting the beats. Rehearsing the lines I use when leaving early feels more dignified than staying invisible. I am fine. I am happy for them. I will get a ride. A cousin from Miranda's side slid into the chair beside me for a moment. She glanced at my place card and said, "Oh, you're Ethan's mother." How sweet. Then she launched into a description of the signature cocktail, speaking slowly as if I were a child. When she drifted away, I returned to the shadow of the flowers. Later in the evening, Miranda passed near my table. Her train gathered in her hands, her smile sharpened by exhaustion and champagne. She leaned down and whispered with a laugh, There are retirement homes more luxurious than that penthouse of yours." She said it as though it were a joke, something light to be tossed into the air. But her eyes told the truth. She had already thought about my future and how it might benefit her own. I sat frozen. The music swelled around me, the band clashing cymbals, guests spinning in glittering circles. But Miranda's words lingered in my ears, colder than the ice in my untouched glass. Retirement homes. Penthouse. Her tone made it sound inevitable, as if she believed the choice would never be mine. I smiled politely, as one does when insult is dressed as humor. She drifted back into the crowd, radiant in her gown, her laughter twining with Sylvia's like a practiced duet. I stayed where I was, hidden by the roses, my chest heavy with unspoken truths. In that moment, I understood something Harold must have known when he pressed the brass key into my palm before he died. Silence was not weakness. Silence was armor. That night, as I walked alone to my car, I touched the outline of the key through the fabric of my dress. I had not told anyone about the penthouse. Not Ethan, not Miranda, not even Clara, my neighbor and closest friend. At the wedding, my silence had made me invisible. But later, I would discover that the same silence would protect me. Because a seat behind flowers may hide a mother from the photographs, but it also shields her eyes, sharp enough to see what others overlook. And I had seen enough. After the wedding, I went home, set my purse on the counter, and lifted the cedar box from the closet shelf. The brass key lay where I left it the night Harold pressed it into my palm. Beside it rested a blue folder labeled in his careful hand, Penthouse. I carried the folder to the kitchen table and put the kettle on. The city breathed beyond the window, buses sighed, and a horn complained. I took one long breath the way Harold taught me before hard things, then opened the folder. The first page was a letter. Harold never wrote to impress. He wrote to steady. "My dear Ursula," it began, "if you are reading this, I am not there to steady your hand. What follows is protection, not display. This is your armor." The words settled over me with the weight of something made to fit. He explained what I had never said aloud to anyone, not even Ethan. Years of quiet buying and patient selling, a partner who needed cash at the wrong moment, renovations paid in cash and time, not spectacle. He had acquired a corner penthouse above the river, then shaped it into stillness with light and care. Appraisers argued and still landed high. 60 million, a number with paper behind it, not gossip. The structure mattered more than the figure. Harold had placed the penthouse in an irrevocable trust. Witnesses who owed us nothing had signed. A successor trustee was named. Distributions were at my discretion. A spendthrift clause barred grasping hands. If anyone sought authority over me without true medical proof of incapacity, the assets would remain insulated, as calm and distant as a lighthouse in bad weather. He believed the law could be a fence my quiet could lean on. Behind the letter were tidy copies, deed, schedule of assets, a memorandum to record with the county, and a healthcare proxy. At the bottom of several pages, I saw Carl Jensen's name near the notary seal. Harold trusted him. "Call Carl if anyone hurries you," Harold wrote. "Process is the antidote to panic." I let my mind walk the rooms we had first visited dust-heavy at dusk. We rode the private elevator into quiet. Windows lifted the East River to eye level and unrolled the skyline south like a map. There was a terrace and a small herb bed. He chose hinges that closed without a sound and floors that refused to complain. A pantry cut to the width of my baking sheets. A reading lamp bent like a question over the chair he promised to use. Illness came like stubborn weather, and still he wrote at this table, assembling the binder that would outlast his breath. He said protection should live on paper, not in arguments. I read his letter again, slower. "Do not announce," he wrote. "Let people reveal themselves in the presence of a secret. Say little, arrange everything. If they bring urgency, ask for drafts. If they speak about love, bring counsel. If fear arrives, read the trust out loud." It was not poetry. It was direction. The level was set. My work was to keep the bubble between the lines. I took the folder downstairs to the small safe bolted into the wall behind the shelves. My fingers knew the ridges of the key. The door opened with a soft click like a room exhaling. Inside lay our ordinary papers: marriage certificate, passports. I slid the folder beside them and felt the strangeness of putting a future away. The kettle hissed when I came back up. I wrapped my hands around the heat and heard Miranda's reception joke as it had been intended, light and cutting. There are retirement homes more luxurious than that penthouse. She had said it with a smile. She had meant a plan. Her joke had a spreadsheet. Oliver Pike had a template. Both were waiting on my signature. I needed to stand in the place I was protecting. The doorman tipped his cap when I told him I would be upstairs. In the private elevator, my reflection hovered in the brushed steel, a woman reclaiming the outline of her life. Light met me when the doors opened. Even empty, the rooms felt kept. I walked to the glass and pressed my palm to the cool. Barges moved along the river, like thoughts traveling from doubt to clarity. I unlocked the terrace. Wind lifted my hair. I whispered the sentence Harold chose for courage. "This is your armor." He had not armed me to fight. He had armed me to remain. At the built-in desk sat the binder Carl had assembled from Harold's instructions. Tabs labeled deed, trust, proxy, memorandum, contacts. On top lay a yellow index card in Harold's print. "Read the trust aloud when you are afraid." I did. Irrevocable, successor trustee, no assignment, independent physician. 2 signatures before any springing authority. Each phrase clicked like a latch. Harold had trusted the future to paper. I would trust myself to patience, to process, and to the simple discipline of reading every line twice. I closed the binder and looked around. The penthouse was not a trophy. It was a record of small choices: patched elbows, soup stretched with water, coupons clipped at a kitchen table. 1,000 evenings when we decided to be kind instead of right. People speak of fortune as if it arrives like weather. Ours arrived like a ledger that finally balanced. I locked the terrace, pressed the elevator button, and descended toward ground where people forget that quiet can be a shield. As the car dropped, something in me rose. Harold had arranged the law so that my name could not be bullied into giving itself away. All I had to do was follow instructions. I could be quiet. I could be clear. I could call Carl if they pressed. And when they asked for the keys, I could smile and keep my hand on the latch. I was sweeping crumbs from the kitchen counter when the doorbell rang again. The sound carried a weight I already knew. When I opened the door, there stood Miranda in a pearl gray coat, her lipstick sharper than her smile. Beside her, once more, was Oliver Pike, the attorney with his polished briefcase. "We thought we'd follow up," Miranda said lightly, stepping inside as if invited. "There's no reason to delay what's best for everyone." Oliver opened his case, set a folder on my table, and slid the top page toward me. This is standard, Mrs. Hayes. Durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy, financial authorization. Ethan has already consented. All we need now is your signature. I sat down slowly, folding my hands around a cup I had just poured. The steam rose between us like a barrier. You'll understand, I said calmly, if I'd prefer my attorney review any document before I sign. Oliver's smile thinned. Of course. But these are time-sensitive. The sooner this is executed, the more secure your family will be. Miranda leaned forward, her manicured finger tapping the page. Ethan is worried, Ursula. He doesn't want you overwhelmed. We've been talking about responsibilities. It's too much for one person. You know that I studied her face, the shine of her earrings, the tremor under her practiced tone. Ethan is my son, I answered. He has known me all his life. He has seen me balance ledgers longer than he has been alive. If he doubts me now, that doubt is not his alone. Oliver cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, delay could complicate matters. Banks are less flexible when paperwork isn't in place. Signatures prevent unnecessary scrutiny. I let the silence hold. My spoon tapped once against the saucer, then rested. Miranda shifted in her chair. She did not like silence. It asked her to show her real shape. Finally, she leaned closer, voice low but sharp. You should know Ethan already signed on another matter. The Langford accounts needed a guarantor. He agreed. The words pierced deeper than any legal phrase. My son had already signed? A guarantor? For her family? I steadied my breath. He signed for your mother's debts? I asked. Miranda's smile tightened. Families support each other. The wedding was expensive. Life is expensive. Ethan did what any good husband would do. I let my hand rest on the table. Inside me, Harold's voice rose like a wall. Do not rush. Do not bend until you must. I said, if Ethan signed something, that is his choice. But I will not surrender keys to this home. Not today. Not to you. Oliver shifted tactics. You misunderstand. This is not surrender. It's protection. Think of it as an umbrella, useful when storms come. I looked at the folder, then back at him. The penthouse is not an umbrella. It is stone and glass, built on sacrifices you cannot imagine. Protection already exists. It was written by Harold and notarized by men who still believe signatures mean something. Miranda exhaled sharply. You make this harder than it has to be. Ethan only wants peace. Peace, I said softly, is never bought with someone else's dignity. The clock on the wall clicked 3 times. Oliver gathered his papers, trying to mask his irritation. We'll be in touch, Mrs. Hayes. At the door, Miranda turned back, her eyes narrowed. Don't make Ethan choose between us. You may not like the side he takes. I met her stare without blinking. I already know the side he is standing on. What I wonder is whether he knows it himself. They left without another word. The briefcase caught the light, flashing like a blade. When the door shut, I pressed my palm to the wood and drew in a long, steady breath. Harold had prepared me for this. His letter was more than memory. It was armor. I returned to the kitchen, poured the tea into the sink, and brewed a fresh pot. My pulse slowed as the kettle hissed. The boundary had been drawn, the first stake hammered into the ground. They would be back, I knew. But so would I. I looked at the key resting in my pocket, warm against my palm. Let them come with papers and polished words. My answer would not change. I would stand my ground, as silent and unmovable as the penthouse itself. Clara found me on the porch with a broom in my hands and the light still off, though the afternoon had begun to thin. I had not swept a single leaf. I kept my shoulders square to the street, but inside I felt bent. Clara is 70, a widow with a voice like a soft bell. She set a jar of peonies on the railing and studied my face. "You did not come back for cake," she said. I gave the polite answer. I had a headache. She tipped her head toward the broom. "Is it worse now?" I swallowed the answer I give strangers and gave her the real one. "They came again," I said. "Miranda and the attorney. Papers on the table. Words like protection. The word tasted like tin." Clara opened my door so the house could breathe, then stood beside me. "You are not invisible," she said. The sentence moved through me the way the first swallow of tea warms a chest. It met a bruise I had not named. At the wedding, I had disappeared behind roses. This week, I had hidden behind later. I had thought silence was a hallway I could not leave. Her sentence cut a door in the wall and turned on a light. I nodded. Then the nod became a tremor. Clara took the broom and leaned it against the rail. "Sit," she said. We sat on the top step. The maple tossed coins of shade over the stairs. I pressed a knuckle to my mouth and tasted salt. "I hate crying in daylight," I told her. "It feels like dropping laundry on the lawn." She smiled. "Cry where the air is honest," she said. "The wind knows what to do with sorrow." So I cried. I cried for table 12. I cried for a folder that turned a life into forms. Clara waited, unafraid of the sounds a heart makes when it stops pretending to be tidy. When I was done, she handed me a handkerchief that smelled of starch. "He signed something," I said. "Miranda told me. A guarantee. For her, family, and now they want the keys as if my life is a drawer." Clara's jaw worked as if she had bitten a seed. "I heard pieces," she said. "Sylvia talks too loud when she wants the world to think the music is still playing." My cousin's daughter caters for the Langfords. The staff hears what the violins hide. Bills stacked, deposits overdue, a florist paid with a promise, a planner tapping his pen, a landlord asking for certified funds. Weddings are theaters. Someone has to pay for the lights. Her words steadied me. My hurt arranged itself into a long, clear line. "So the urgency is not about my health," I said. "It is about her accounts." Clara nodded. "People rename hunger as care when they want a seat at your table. It does not make them monsters. It does not make you a meal." The kettle clicked as if it had held its breath with us. I brought out 2 cups. We drank without hurry. Steam braided into the air and vanished. My breathing matched the braid. "I keep thinking of Harold," I said. "The night he put the brass key in my hand. He told me to use it when I needed to, not when I was begged or shamed." I slipped a hand into my cardigan pocket and felt the ridges. "I hear him when the room is quiet." Clara tapped the peonies. "You can make a room quiet on purpose," she said. "Put a card on your door. Tell them you never sign at the table. Make the world walk at your speed." "Carl will like you," I said. "He calls process a life jacket." Clara grinned. "I call it dignity," she said. "Dignity is a door that locks from the inside." We sat while a truck rattled past, and a child on a scooter drew a bright line down the walk. My chest felt less like a cupboard stuffed with towels, and more like a room aired and clean. My hands stopped shaking. "I keep asking whether I should forgive Ethan," I said. "Then I hate the question for arriving early." Clara tucked a stray hair behind her ear. "Forgiveness is not an advance," she said. "It is a receipt. Do it after the work is done. Right now, your work is to hold the line so he has something to come back to." I closed my eyes for one breath. "He says he wants peace," I said. "What he wants is quiet." Clara sipped her tea. "Quiet is precious," she said. "Make sure it is the kind you choose." We finished our cups. I stood, rolled my shoulders, and picked up the broom. The bristles finally moved, gathering leaves into a narrow windrow. The small sound of work rearranged the air. Clara watched and nodded. "Better," she said. As she turned to go, she touched my sleeve. "If they come again, call me before you answer. I will stand on the porch and admire your roses very loudly. It helps to have a witness." I laughed. A sound. "You are a good neighbor," I said. "You are a whole person," she answered. "Do not let a bad seating chart convince you otherwise." When she left, I carried the peonies into the kitchen. The house smelled like lemon soap and petals. I wrote a note and stuck it to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like an apple. "Hold your line. Ask for drafts. Speak in whole sentences." Then I walked to the closet and pressed my face into Harold's plaid shirt. Citrus, pine, clean cotton. A life that believed in patient repairs. In the weave of that fabric, I heard the sentence I needed for the day ahead. "I am not invisible. I will not sign. I will open the door when I am ready, and not a minute sooner." When night fell, I could not keep my thoughts from circling back to Ethan. I sat in the kitchen with the lights low, the kettle quiet, the house holding its breath. My son's face lingered in fragments. The boy who once called me his angel, and the man who now avoided my eyes whenever Miranda spoke for him. Memory does not ask permission. It arrives. And that night, it arrived with the fever that nearly took him. He was 6. Harold was on a delivery 2 towns over. The wind battered the gutters, the power flickered, and Ethan burned. His small body curled against me, his forehead hot enough to frighten me. I made a nest of quilts on the living room floor, towels warmed in the dryer, a bowl of water beside us. I whispered the plain promises only a mother can make. "I will stay. I am here. I will not sleep until you are safe." I remember the weight of him, damp hair plastered to his temples, the thermometer glowing red in the dark. My chest ached with every shallow breath he took. I pressed a cloth to his skin, counted heartbeats against my palm, and prayed in silence that morning would bring relief. And when the fever broke just before dawn, tears slid down my cheeks without shame. He blinked, half dreaming, and murmured, "You're my angel, Mom." He did not remember the storm, but I remembered it for both of us. Now, decades later, I wondered how that boy had become the man who let his wife bring strangers into my kitchen with folders of authority. I thought of his eyes back then, clear, trusting, so certain that my arms could banish any danger. Those same eyes now flickered away when the word signature left Miranda's lips. I rose from my chair and walked to the closet. Harold's plaid shirt still hung where I left it, the fabric thinned by years, the scent faint but true. I pressed it to my face. It smelled of soap, citrus, and patience. The memory of Ethan's fever and the shirt's quiet strength blurred together until my throat tightened. I asked the question aloud, though no one answered. How do you raise a child through sickness and storms, only to find him too weak to shield you when your turn comes? The house gave no reply, only the sigh of pipes and the steady tick of the clock. I sat on the bed with the shirt in my lap, fingers smoothing the worn cuff. I thought of all the times I had bent myself to make life easier for Ethan. Extra shifts at the store so he could have new shoes. Quiet dinners where I praised him when Harold was too tired to talk. Encouragement when his report cards came home wrinkled. I had wrapped him in unconditional care, thinking it would teach him strength. Instead, it taught him that comfort would always meet him halfway. That realization hurt more than Miranda's insults or Oliver's folder. My silence had raised him. My endless patience had kept him soft. I had believed love could be enough armor for him to grow into a man who stood straight. But I had mistaken indulgence for guidance. I pressed my eyes shut until stars sparked behind my lids. In the dark, I heard Harold's voice again, the last night before the hospital took him away. Use the key when you need to, not when you are begged or shamed. He had known even then that Ethan might bend too easily. He had built the trust not only to protect the penthouse, but to protect me from our son's weakness. The thought cut deep. I wanted to defend Ethan, to excuse him, to believe he was merely afraid. But the image of his hand hovering over Miranda's papers would not fade. Fear had become compliance. And compliance, once chosen, is a kind of betrayal. I smoothed Harold's shirt one more time and folded it carefully. Then I walked back to the kitchen. The peonies Clara had left stood on the counter, their petals opening wide as if to remind me that beauty does not ask permission to exist. I touched one bloom and whispered, "He used to call me his angel." My voice trembled. Now he calls me his burden. The kettle clicked as though reminding me of routine. I filled it, set it on the burner, and waited for the slow hiss. I knew what the next days would bring. More visits, more papers, more pressure disguised as care. But I also knew this truth. Harold had given me armor, and Clara had given me witness. I was not alone. As the kettle whistled, I poured a cup and sat by the window. The city lights blinked like patient stars. I wrapped my hands around the heat and let the memory settle. Ethan had once trusted me with his fragile life. Now, I would have to trust myself with my own. The boy who whispered my angel was gone. In his place stood a man who could not stand tall. And for the first time, I understood the cost of confusing endless comfort with strength. Love without boundaries does not build courage. It builds dependency. And tonight, the weight of that truth sat heavier than any fever I had ever carried. I was folding Harold's shirt back into the cedar box when I heard the knock. Not sharp like Miranda's, not officious like Oliver Pike's. This knock was hesitant, uneven. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there, my son, my only child, his shoulders bent as though the air itself pressed down on him. "Mom," he said, his voice already apologizing. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He crossed the threshold but did not remove his coat, as if he meant to keep the visit short. He rubbed his hands together, glanced at the floor, then finally looked at me. His eyes, the same eyes that once begged for comfort in the fevered dark, now darted away whenever mine held steady. "I know Miranda and Oliver came by," he began. "I should have told you first. They think it's safer if everything is in one place. If you just sign, things will be easier." I set the cedar box on the counter and folded my arms. "Easier for whom, Ethan?" "For all of us," he said quickly, but the words were too thin to carry weight. He sat at the table, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "Mom, I just want things calm. I can't have fights between you and Miranda. I can't live like that." I sat across from him, my voice low but unshaken. You mean you cannot live with the sound of my resistance. Peace is not purchased with my silence. He looked up sharply, wounded. Why do you always think the worst of her? Miranda isn't the enemy. She came with a lawyer and papers, I answered. She mocked my home at your wedding. She speaks of my future as if it were hers to design. If she is not the enemy, she is certainly not a daughter. He winced as though the truth was a lash. Please, he whispered. Just sign it. Let them feel secure. I don't want to stand between you. I leaned forward. You are already standing between us. Not as a shield, but as a door left unlocked, and it is your hand that holds it open. For the first time, he met my eyes and held them. I saw the boy who once called me his angel, trembling beneath the man who now called himself husband. His lips parted, but nothing came. Ethan, I said softly, look at me. Your father worked a lifetime so this roof could stand above us. He left words in black ink so I would never need to beg. Do you think I will throw all of that away because your wife feels entitled to walls she did not build? He swallowed. His Adam's apple rose and fell like a buoy in rough water. I just want everyone to be happy. Happiness built on fraud is rot, I replied. You think signing will quiet the storm, but storms do not stop when you hand them your umbrella. They demand the house next. And then the ground. He shifted, uneasy. His gaze fell to the counter where the brass key lay on a folded napkin. His eyes lingered there too long. The silence deepened, and I knew. He had already imagined that key in his pocket, already pictured himself sliding it into the lock of the penthouse, already felt the weight of surrender dressed as relief. I reached out, covered the key with my palm, and broke the silence. This will never be yours to give away, I said. His face crumpled, but he said nothing. Instead, he stood abruptly, pushing the chair back with a scrape. I can't argue with you, he muttered. I came here to ask for peace, and all you give me are battles. I rose too, but my voice stayed calm. A battle is what you create when you confuse comfort with truth. Peace, Ethan, is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice. Learn that before it costs you everything. He hesitated at the door. For one breath, I thought he might turn back, kneel, and remember the boy who clung to me through the fever. But instead, he pulled the handle, slipped into the night, and left me with the sound of footsteps retreating down the walk. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against the wood. My hand found the key again. The truth weighed heavy in my chest. My son was no longer asking for my guidance. He was asking for my surrender. And I could not give it, not to him, not to anyone. The brass ridges pressed into my palm, sharp enough to sting. I whispered Harold's words aloud to steady myself. This is your armor. And I knew that from this night forward, the battle was no longer between me and Miranda. It was between silence that protected and silence that destroyed. I would have to choose which silence to wield, and when. I called Carl Jensen at 8 the next morning. He answered on the second ring, steady. I told him about the visits, the folder, and the sentence that cut deepest. Ethan has already agreed. Carl listened, then offered the line that works like a handrail. A signature is a battlefield. Never sign with a shaking hand. He arrived before 9. We sat at my kitchen table. He opened a yellow pad and nodded toward the blue folder Harold left. Let us see what Harold built, he said. I passed the folder across the table. Carl read the trust first, eyes moving with practiced care. Irrevocable, he said. Successor trustee named. Spendthrift protection. Independent physician required before any transfer of authority. This is a fortress. We will still check every window he flipped to the deed and the schedule of assets. Title is clean, and there is more. He angled a stamped rider I had overlooked. Your building is a certified historic structure, he said. Harold recorded a facade easement and preservation covenant. Any mortgage, pledge, or lien requires approval from the easement holder and the State Preservation Office. Most banks will not touch it without layers of consent. He smiled. Federal protection can frustrate decorators. It is excellent armor against opportunists. The room felt a degree warmer. I exhaled slowly. So if someone tried to use the penthouse as collateral, I said, they would hit a wall. 2 walls, Carl replied. The trust and the covenant. Together they make a door that opens only when you ask, he wrote on the pad. Recorder memorandum, proxy letter, bank instructions, voice password, notary plan, door card. We began with health care. We keep your springing power of attorney, he said. 2 physicians must certify incapacity. We update your healthcare proxy, add Clara as first call, Ethan as second. We attach a HIPAA release so doctors can speak to Clara and to me. He drafted the changes with neat block letters. I read every line twice and nodded. Next came the banks. On speaker, he guided me through exact sentences. We added a voice password. We placed a note that no transfer authority can be added without my in-person appearance at the branch. We required 2 employee signatures for any change to beneficiaries. We confirmed designations matched the trust file. The manager offered to email a summary. Carl said, paper only. Certified mail when it matters. He handed me a short checklist. Freeze credit. Remove my birthday from public listings. Unlist the landline. Thieves prefer clipboards to crowbars, he said. We will not make it easy. We reviewed the deed and the memorandum Harold drafted. We will record this, Carl said, so a clerk who has never met you can still see the trust when anyone searches the parcel. He wrote down the block and a lot numbers, then slid a small white card across the table. The print was clean and final. I never sign documents presented without counsel. All communications go through my attorney. Provide drafts 48 hours in advance. I read the card aloud and felt the room settle. Put this by the door, he said. It speaks for you before your voice has to work. He produced a second card with a passphrase for institutions. Never say this over the phone unless you initiated the call, he said. Never put it in email. I memorized it and tucked the card behind my library card. We built a log next. Date, time, caller, exact language. Polished memories lose to records, Carl said. I wrote yesterday's talk with Ethan, then copied Miranda's line word for word. Next, notary plan, he said. We use one I trust. He comes here. We sign only documents we create. Alma will bring her seal. He penciled Friday at 10 and drew a box around it. What about Oliver? I asked. Today belongs to people who need you confused, Carl said. We belong to process. He dialed Oliver, switched to speaker, and introduced himself. All communications through counsel, he said. Provide drafts 48 hours in advance. No doorstep signings, no notary you bring. If you contact my client directly again, we will note it. He ended the call without waiting for agreement. A text buzzed. Miranda, Friday works. Carl nodded and did not reply. We do not perform gratitude for boundaries, he said. He underlined the preservation rider. If anyone talks about loans, he said, tell them any encumbrance triggers review by the easement holder and the state office. The jargon will tire them first. He thought of everything, I said. He thought of you, Carl said. That is different and better. He slid a pen across the table. Sign the proxy updates and the HIPAA release. I signed, careful and slow. He placed flags where Alma would seal. We will record the memorandum after we notarize. I will courier copies to the preservation group so their file reflects the trust. When we finished, the table looked like a map laid flat. Tabs, lists, envelopes, a stack of letters ready for certified mail. Carl capped his pen and checked his watch. You will feel a pressure drop when the first red seal lands, he said. Until then, keep the house quiet. Do not argue. Do not explain. If they knock, hand them the card. If they insist, close the door. He stood, slid the pad into his case, and squeezed my shoulder once. You are doing this exactly right, he said. The law favors the patient. After he left, I taped the white card inside the front window. I slid the proxy updates into a folder labeled Notary Plan and placed it beside the blue binder. Then I brewed tea and watched the steam rise in a straight line. Outside, leaves moved like readable pages. Protection had taken on a shape I could carry. Paper, ink, process, patience. The penthouse remained high above the river. The ground beneath my feet felt higher, too. I was ready to meet Friday without fear, and any knock with a sentence that did not shake. That night, after Carl left and the house had gone still, I pulled out a sheet of stationery from the drawer. The lamp on the table threw a small circle of light, and within that circle I placed my pen, my tea, and the memory of Harold's voice. I began to write the letter I had carried in my chest since the day he died. My dearest Harold, I wrote, I promised I would speak to you even when you could not answer. Tonight I need to keep that promise. The words came slowly at first, halting, like a child learning to walk. I told him about the wedding, about table 12 hidden behind flowers, about Sylvia parading like royalty while I was treated like an afterthought. I told him how Miranda's laughter carried knives, how she mocked the penthouse as if it were already hers. Then I wrote of Ethan, our Ethan, the boy who once clutched my hand through fever and called me his angel, the man who now avoids my eyes, who lets his wife bring lawyers into my kitchen. He says he wants peace, I wrote, but what he wants is for me to surrender. He forgets that peace built on surrender is not peace at all. My hand shook. Drops of ink pooled in the loops of my letters. I paused and let the silence steady me. I am afraid, I admitted on the page. Not of losing the penthouse. You made sure that is protected. I am afraid of being erased. I am afraid of opening my eyes one morning and finding that no one sees me at all, that I have become a shadow, an inconvenience, a burden. The words tasted of iron. I pressed harder with the pen. I am afraid, I wrote, that our son no longer belongs to himself, that he is being written over by debts and promises he does not understand, that he will vanish into someone else's hunger. I folded the page halfway, then opened it again. My throat burned, but I forced the pen to move. But listen to me, Harold. Tonight, I decide that my silence is not surrender. It is not hiding. It is a weapon. I will use it to make them reveal themselves. I will let their words expose their greed, while I hold my ground in quiet. I will not shout. I will not plead. I will not give them the satisfaction of seeing me beg. My silence will be my answer, and in that silence lies my power. Tears blurred the page. I blotted them with the edge of my sleeve and continued. You told me the penthouse was my armor. But I think the true armor is this resolve. You knew I would need it. You left the papers, the trust, the clauses, the federal protection. But more than that, you left me the memory of your calm. I hear it now when my own breath grows ragged. I will carry it as surely as I carry this key. I signed the letter, with all my strength, your Ursula, and laid the pen down. The paper trembled in my hands, but when I folded it into thirds and slipped it into the cedar box beside his shirt, the trembling stopped. I sat back in the chair and let the silence swell. It was no longer heavy. It was no longer an absence. It was a shield, and I was learning how to hold it. Through the window, I could see the city lights, bright and indifferent, each one a story burning in glass. Somewhere in those towers, lawyers like Oliver sharpened their contracts, women like Miranda rehearsed their smiles, and mothers like me wondered how they had raised sons who bent so easily. But here, in this small circle of lamplight, I found a clarity that steadied me. I whispered it aloud, the vow I had written. Silence is not weakness. It is the weapon they will never understand. Then I blew out the lamp, carried the cedar box back to its place, and went to bed with the key warm in my hand. It was raining when I overheard them. The kind of rain that slicks pavement into mirrors and drives voices into corners. I had parked 2 blocks from the pharmacy, deciding the walk would clear my head. But as I stepped into the covered lot, umbrella folding under my arm, I heard laughter echo off concrete. I recognized Miranda's sharp trill before I even saw her. Sylvia's lower, honeyed tone followed. They stood near a black sedan, its headlights throwing light across the wet ground. I froze behind a pillar, heart thudding. "Don't look so anxious," Sylvia was saying. "Once the penthouse is in our hands, the banks will open every door." Miranda's heels clicked as she shifted her weight. "If your loans fall through, Mother, this whole performance will have been a waste. You promised me security. You promised Ethan wouldn't have to worry about a thing." Sylvia's voice tightened. "And I promised the florist, the planner, the caterer. Do you know how much credit I burned to make that wedding look like a Langford affair? The deposits alone could drown me. The penthouse is the collateral. Once Ursula signs, it's ours. The bank can't refuse $60 million in glass and stone." I pressed my back to the pillar, the rain dripping at my collar. My chest constricted with every word. They were not talking about family. They were talking about leverage. Miranda laughed again, but it held no lightness. "She's stubborn. She thinks Harold's paperwork means something. Ethan says she hides behind that lawyer, Carl. But everyone has a weak point. She'll give in." Sylvia's reply was sharp. "Then Ethan must push harder." "He already signed the guarantor note. Did he tell you?" "He placed his name beside mine for the banquet loan. If she refuses to sign, the creditors will circle him next. How long do you think he can hold out before he begs her himself?" My throat burned. My son's name entangled in their debts, used like a pawn on a board already rigged. He had signed. He had placed himself under their burden, and now they intended to use him as a lever against me. Miranda's heels clicked again. So the choice is hers. Sign or watch Ethan drown in obligations he can't pay. Sylvia's laugh was brittle. "Exactly. And once the penthouse is secured, we can refinance the Langford estate. The creditors will scatter. We'll host dinners in that glass tower, and everyone will know the Langfords are untouchable again." A car door slammed. The sedan roared, and the echo faded. I stayed frozen until silence returned, then stepped out into the wet air. My umbrella shook in my grip. I walked the rest of the way to the pharmacy, but I could not hear my own footsteps. Only their words. The truth was clear now. Ethan had already signed on their behalf, his fear binding him to their ruin. They meant to tether me to the same anchor, to drag me down with them. I bought nothing. I returned home with empty hands, water dripping from my sleeves, and sat at the kitchen table with Harold's letter. His words felt heavier now. Say little. Arrange everything. I whispered aloud. They think Ethan will be my weakness. But in that moment, I felt resolve settle deeper than fear. If they believed my love for my son could be exploited, they had underestimated the strength of a mother who has already survived loss. The rain eased outside. I placed the umbrella by the door, laid the cedar box on the table, and opened the trust again. Every clause glinted like iron. Harold had built a fortress not only for me, but for the dignity of silence that could not be coerced. That night, I knew what I faced. Not a family dispute, but a siege. And I vowed they would not breach the walls, not with signatures, not with debts, not with Ethan's trembling silence. The penthouse would stand, and so would I. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee and powdered sugar. Folding tables wore plastic cloths and low geraniums. I stood by the bulletin board, unsure whether to stay or slip out, when Clara hooked her arm through mine and steered me toward a table near the piano. "Come," she said. "You need a choir." 3 women looked up and made space without. Ceremony. Ruth wore a blue scarf and sensible shoes. Bernice kept a small ledger in her purse. Althea had ink smudges on her fingers from altar notes. Clara set me down between Ruth and Bernice as if I had always belonged there. I kept my hands around the warm paper cup until my pulse settled. Clara told them the outline: a bride with a lawyer, a folder on my table, the word protection repeated like a drum. The women nodded in that way people do when they recognize the music. Ruth spoke first. "My nephew tried the same after Charlie died," she said. "He wanted a key and a power of attorney. He called it love. I told him love does not need my signature to stand upright." Bernice patted my arm. "Banks send glossy pamphlets and grandchildren carry clipboards," she said. "I keep a form by my door that says I never sign at home. They can make an appointment and bring a witness, or they can leave with their smiles." Althea slid a folded sheet across the table. "A checklist for widows," she said. "Freeze credit, shred old bills, add a passphrase, never answer numbers you do not know. You can copy it." Ruth leaned closer. "You held your line," she said. "That is harder than people think." "I did not want to become a spectacle," I said. "They want signatures fast. They speak of safety. They treat my life like a loose hinge." Bernice's diamond flashed under the fluorescent lights. "Shiny means nothing without a clasp," she said. "You are the clasp. Close it." Across the room, the choir director struck a chord. Children ran between chairs. Clara poured coffee. "Tell them about the card," she said. I described the white card Carl printed that lives by my door. I never sign documents presented without counsel. All communications through my attorney. Drafts 48 hours in advance. Althea opened her ledger and pointed to 3 lines in neat hand. No on the doorstep, no by phone, yes only with a witness. "Tape those by your sink," she said. "Tape them to your heart." For the first time in days, I did not feel like a problem to be solved. I felt like a woman among women. A 4th chair scraped back. A slender woman from the back pew sat down and folded her hands. "I am May," she said. "I do not talk much, but you should hear this." Her voice carried the flat music of fields. "After my husband died, I signed a durable power because my son said it would help with paperwork. He moved money to protect me. He mortgaged the farm to consolidate. I lost the north pasture the first winter. The bank took the rest after a drought. I still bake pies for this hall so my hands have work while the lawyers speak. The table went quiet. May looked at me and lifted her chin. You are not cruel for refusing, she said. You are careful. Careful is how barns stay standing. I felt both sorrow and steel. Ruth reached for May's hand. Bernice slid a napkin across. Althea closed her ledger like a blessing. Thank you, I told May. They say I am making a fuss. May shook her head. Noise is how you hear a loose board. You are not a fuss. You are the foreman. I told them about Ethan, how his eyes search the floor when Miranda speaks, how he calls obedience peace. I admitted the fear that keeps me awake, that my love will be used as a lever until I pry my own life loose. No one flinched. Clara's hand found my shoulder. Ruth said, Love does not mean lending your backbone. Bernice said, Let him learn to stand where wind can touch him. Althea scribbled a number on the back of a hymn schedule. A legal clinic comes Tuesdays, she said. Bring any letters? They teach free. Younger women need your story. They think scams wear masks instead of wedding rings. She pressed the paper into my palm as if it were communion. I breathed easier. The room sharpened into detail, the scuffed piano bench, a patch of tape on the linoleum, sunlight slanting through a high window onto a stack of plates. When the bell rang noon, Clara looped her arm through mine again. You came for coffee, she said. You are leaving with a chorus. At the door, I held it for a woman carrying a tray. The hinge squeaked and then settled. On the steps, I looked back at the hall where laughter rose like a modest hymn. My fear did not vanish. It changed shape. It no longer felt like a mouth at my ear. It felt like a weight I could carry while moving forward. Thank you, I said to Clara. She squeezed my hand. Good doors today, she said. We walked home slowly, letting the neighborhood pass at ordinary speed. I tucked Althea's checklist into my coat and pictured Ruth's steady shoes on a barn floor. By the time my porch came into view, the white card in my window looked less like a warning and more like a welcome that included a rule. I unlocked the door and felt the house breathe with me. Not humble, not loud, steady and seen. Inside, I set the checklist by the kettle and wrote 3 lines on a sticky note. Hold your line. Ask for drafts. Call Clara first. The house answered with ordinary sounds. The clock ticked. The pipes settled. The quiet felt like company instead of absence. The call came late in the evening, when the street outside was quiet and the kettle had just begun to hum. I almost let it ring, but something in me knew it was Ethan. I lifted the receiver and heard his breath before his words. Mom, he whispered, I need to see you. When I opened the door, he was already on the porch, hair damp with sweat though the air was cool. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands trembling as he stepped inside. He didn't sit at first, just stood there like a boy caught in trouble. Finally, he dropped into the chair by the window, head in his hands. I tried to hold it together, he said, but I can't anymore. I need to tell you the truth. I stayed standing, arms folded, waiting. His words came out halting, but the weight of them filled the room. Miranda and Sylvia, they pressured me. They told me it was just a formality, just something to help the family finances. I signed the guarantee for their banquet loan, and then another. Mother, I almost signed the papers for the penthouse, too. They pushed so hard. They told me you wouldn't care. that it was the only way to save our name. The chair beneath him creaked as he bent lower, voice breaking. I was a coward. I thought if I did what they asked, the shouting would stop. I thought if I gave them what they wanted, I could finally breathe. But all it did was dig me deeper. I betrayed you, Mom. I nearly betrayed Dad's trust. I nearly gave away everything he built for you. I walked to the table slowly, the key in my pocket pressing like a question against my thigh. You didn't nearly betray me, I said quietly. You did. You put your name beside theirs. You let their hunger carry your hand. And if Harold's foresight hadn't built walls, you would have handed them the keys to my life. His shoulders shook. I know. I know. I hate myself for it. He lifted his face to me, streaked with tears, raw with shame. But I don't know how to get out. I can't undo the loans. I can't undo what I've signed. I held his gaze, forcing him not to look away. No, you cannot undo it, but you can stop pretending it was love. You can call it what it is, fear. And fear is not a foundation for any marriage or any life. He broke then, sobs racking his chest. The sound tore at me. I saw the boy with the fever again, the child who once called me his angel. I longed to gather him close, to wrap him in comfort. But I stayed in my chair, because comfort had already softened him too much. Instead, I reached for Harold's blue folder and set it on the table between us. Read this, I told him. Every page. This is the fortress your father built. It saved you from yourself. If you want to breathe again, you start here. You learn what it means to protect instead of surrender. He looked at the folder, then back at me. His lips parted, but no words came. He placed a trembling hand on the cover as if it burned. I don't deserve this, he said. Deserve has nothing to do with it, I answered. Your father loved you enough to build this shield, even knowing you might one day hand it to the wrong people. Now you must decide if you will keep standing in their shadow or learn to stand in your own light. The clock ticked, slow and unyielding. At last Ethan whispered, I'll try. Trying is not enough, I said. You must choose, and every day after, you must choose again. He nodded weakly, tears dripping onto the folder. For the first time in months, his shoulders seemed lighter, as if confessing had peeled away a layer of weight. But I knew the fight was far from over. He had revealed the truth, yes, but he had not yet proven he could live by it. When he finally rose to leave, he lingered at the door. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I don't know if you can ever forgive me. I touched the frame of the door, the same door Miranda had once crossed with a lawyer at her side. Forgiveness is not today's work, I said. Today's work is standing straight. He lowered his head, then stepped into the night. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against the wood. My chest ached, but the ache was sharp, clean, not the dull heaviness of fear. In the quiet, I pressed the brass key into my palm. The truth was painful, but it was mine. Ethan had betrayed me, yes, but the penthouse had held, Harold's trust had held, and so had I. The first call went to them, not to me. I know because I sat in the bank lobby that morning, waiting for a cashier's check to pay the recording fees Carl requested. In a manager's office, I could see Miranda in a white blazer and Sylvia in pearls, arranged as if the room belonged to them. The manager shut his door, set a folder down, and began to speak. I could not hear every word, but I knew the cadence. Trust restrictions, preservation covenant, easement consent, unavailable collateral. He slid a copy of the recorded memorandum across the table and opened his hands in apology. Sylvia leaned forward like a predator denied. Miranda thumbed her phone as if a call could soften ink. They came out fast, breath sharp, heels loud. At the revolving door, Miranda's voice carried. They said federal preservation review is required before any lien. They said the trust is beyond them, Sylvia answered in a thin thread. Then we refinance without it. We lean on the other lines. The door spun them into rain. By afternoon, the chorus began. Vendors rang for payment. The planner left a message with no pleasantries. The florist sent an invoice stamped in red. In a corner of Clara's niece's cafe, a phone on speaker turned amounts into air. Deposits overdue. Acceleration invoked. Credit line frozen. The next morning, I walked to the county clerk. A clerk stamped my envelope with a red seal that looked like a small sun. When I turned to go, Miranda and Sylvia stood at another window. Faces tight. Papers fanned like cards. No one wanted to play. Their whispers rode the marble. They will sue, Miranda said. They will drag us for a party. Sylvia answered, we host benefits to remind people we belong. We will host another outside. A civic bulletin board clung to a lamppost. I had no plan to stop. My eyes found the Langford name anyway. A parcel in Westchester set for auction 2 months ahead. The page fluttered. I let it go. Consequence, like wind, does not ask. Days gathered weight. A process server knocked at the Langford door while I watered Clara's geraniums. He held a manila envelope like a fact. Sylvia opened in silk and took it with 2 fingers, as if disgust could blunt a summons. At dusk, a moving truck arrived for renovations. Lamps and mirrors went in first, then boxes labeled library. News traveled the old way, through rooms where people did not expect to be overheard. At the charity boutique, a woman in navy asked whether Miranda would still chair the spring gala. The director glanced at a list and said the committee had made an adjustment. At the club, someone mentioned dues. Someone else changed the subject. Invitations thinned. Photos posted without tags. Ethan called once, voice low. They are angry, he said. They say you humiliated them. I watched pigeons rearrange along a roofline. I did nothing but record what already existed, I answered. The paper spoke. He was quiet, then said, I told them I will not ask you again. I told them the trust stands. There was a new edge in his voice, not sharp yet, but real. Good, I said. Stand where the wind can touch you. A week later, I rode past Sylvia's Westchester gates. An orange sticker clung to the iron, the kind officials use when they need the world to see. A notice of default hung in a plastic sleeve. A gardener trimmed hedges with the precision of someone paid to pretend nothing had changed. I stayed on the bus. I did not smile. In the city, I walked by the hotel where invitations cluster like birds in spring. The lobby board that once carried Miranda's name was blank. 2 women from earlier committees studied a spreadsheet. We need a new chair, one said. Someone uncomplicated. The other said, insolvent. The elevator opened. They entered without a backward glance. By month's end, the lawsuits had captions and numbers. Letters arrived with words like demand and cure. Accounts closed ranks around the Langfords like doors clicking down a hallway. A discreet column mentioned unforeseen financial transitions and a renewed focus on family. Translation, the phone would ring less. I kept my routines. I filed receipts, baked a loaf on Sunday, and wrote to Harold when grief arrived like weather. Quiet justice does not need an audience. It asks for patience and proper nouns. It travels on paper and arrives with seals. When anger knocked at my chest, demanding spectacle, I made tea and read the trust until the latches in my breath closed. The river kept its course. I kept mine, steady, deliberate, unafraid today, and clear. One afternoon, I turned a corner and saw Miranda alone on a bench outside the bank. Her posture was perfect. Her phone lay dark. For a moment, she looked young, not cruel so much as unprepared for gravity. I stood at the crosswalk and let the light change twice. Then I crossed without speaking. Near dusk, I passed Sylvia on the courthouse steps, pearls in place, heels precise, a folder pressed tight against her ribs. A photographer lifted his camera, then lowered it, already turning toward another story. Sylvia's gaze slid over me like water over stone. By evening, Clara and I sat on my porch while the street settled. She asked no questions. I offered no victory speech. We watched a boy bounce a ball, a dog nose clover, a cloud unspool across ordinary blue. Somewhere, papers moved in offices. Signatures dried. Dates were set. Somewhere, a woman counted rooms. Here, my house breathed. The key in my pocket felt like a steady weight, the kind that keeps a ship true when the water is restless. Justice had not shouted. It took a measured breath and wrote itself in ink. And I, once hidden behind flowers at a wedding, now stood in plain sight without raising my voice. The red seals arrived one by one, small suns on heavy envelopes. Each thump on the doormat felt like pressure leaving the room. Certified receipts for the memorandum, bank confirmations, and a note from the preservation office stating that no encumbrance could proceed without written consent. I stacked them and pressed my palm to the pile. The house felt steady for the first time since the wedding. The penthouse stood where it always had. The trust held. My breathing matched the rhythm of paper and ink. That afternoon, I took the elevator up with lemons and clean towels. When the doors opened, light met me like an old friend. I walked the rooms and opened the terrace. Wind ran through my hair, and the river moved like a long sentence toward the sea. On the desk, Harold's binder waited with his yellow card on top. Read the trust aloud when you are afraid. I was not afraid. I read anyway. Each clause clicked like a latch. Each signature felt like a hand on my shoulder saying, "Hold the line." I set cups on the counter, filled a pitcher, and texted Clara. "Bring the women if you wish. I have a table that needs voices." They arrived with muffins, a warm pie, and 2 bunches of supermarket tulips that looked like courage in paper sleeves. We sat by the windows. Ruth admired the hinges that closed without sound. Bernice measured the pantry with her eyes and called it sensible. Althea touched the easement letter like a relic. May stood quietly at the glass and watched the barges. We ate slowly and laughed the way people do when the worst is past but not forgotten. I told them about the returns, the red seals, the bank manager who finally understood the fence. Althea read my checklist and added 2 lines in neat script. Bring copies to the clinic. Teach the younger ones. Clara squeezed my hand and nodded toward the terrace. Go on, she said. Say what you have been carrying. So I did. I told them I would meet Carl next week to revise my will. I would not leave the penthouse to Ethan. I would place it in a charitable trust to fund housing, legal clinics, and modest stipends for women cornered by paper and fear. The rooms would host workshops and quiet retreats. The terrace would grow herbs for suppers. A portion could be sold one day only to seed an endowment if the building ever needed more than care. I said I could not keep a fortress and pretend it belonged only to me. It saved me. Now it must shelter others. The room fell still. May turned from the glass and wiped her cheek. Ruth's voice trembled but did not break. That is not punishment. That is a map. Bernice pulled a ledger from her bag and began to outline categories, clinics, grants, reserves. Althea smiled the way a tired teacher smiles when a student finds the answer in her own handwriting. Clara nodded once, as if she had expected this since the first knock. I walked to the desk, opened the binder, and laid a clean page on top. In my own hand, I wrote instructions for Carl. Replace prior bequest with charitable trust. Appoint a board of women with lived experience. Require open meetings and public minutes. Set aside a quiet room forever. When I finished, I placed the page under the clip and breathed as though a weight had moved from my ribs to the table where it belonged. We brewed another pot. The afternoon softened. The river darkened. Lights came on across the city like a field of steady beacons. I read Harold's letter aloud, the part where he said the penthouse was my armor. Then I told him what I had done. Armor protects best when it shields more than one heart. I felt him there, the way you feel sunlight on your shoulder when a cloud moves. I did not cry. I let the words settle. The room answered with a quiet I had not known since he died. The women left before dusk with leftovers wrapped in foil and a promise to return. Clara lingered. We stood at the glass with our reflections floating over the city. He would be proud, she said. I placed my hand against the pane. He taught me how to do this, I answered. The difference now is that I am ready to teach others. When the door closed behind her, the penthouse breathed. I walked the rooms once more, turned off lamps, and locked the terrace. Back at the desk, I set the red-sealed stack beside Harold's binder and the page for Carl. I placed the brass key on top and watched it hold its small place in the world. A ship needs ballast. A life does too. My silence had protected me. Now my voice would guide that protection toward women who needed a door that locks from the inside. Before I sign off, I want to speak to the people who walked this road with me. Before we say goodbye, I would love to know where you are watching from. Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let me know in the comments. I read every one with gratitude, and if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Your presence here matters to me deeply. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you, and remember that sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care, and I will see you in the next story.